It's a real privilege to have Dr. Donald Kaberuka here, one of the people I really admire in international development. He was educated in Scotland and was finance minister of Rwanda and well regarded as finance minister of Rwanda. I think if you've been to Rwanda, you've seen the incredible transformation of that country. He was one of the architects of that. And then he had 10 years at the leadership of the African Development Bank and very widely regarded for his leadership of the African Development Bank. Did a couple years at the Kennedy School after that and is now sort of a roving ambassador for development in many ways and has a number of other hats. Earlier this morning, Dr. Kaberuka rolled out a commission report, the Commission on State Fragility, Growth and Development, Escaping the Fragility Trap, which is here. And I suspect that some of the remarks he'll make today will be informed by the release of this report. He co-chaired the commission with former Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron. David Cameron today has an article in the FT which talks about fragile states, and I commend that article to you as well. So, Dr. Kaberuka, I'm so grateful that you're here. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Kaberuka. Come on up, Dr. Kaberuka.
Good afternoon. So, this morning we launched with Prime Minister David Cameron this report at the Center for Global Development. And I'm here to tell you why it matters for you, why it matters for everyone on planet Earth, and what we can do about it. But first of all, let me thank my host for inviting me and to all of you for being here. In 2015, the late head of ONE, Michael, called it the most important year since 1945. He said 2015 was the most important year in development since 1945. In 1945, after World War II, the world came together to try to put together a structure of how a peaceful world, a prosperous world, could look like. So you had all these United Nations organizations, WTO, you had a whole set of arrangements, the World Bank, IMF, and the hope then was that after the disasters of the early part of the century, that the world will see greater peace and prosperity. Now, fast forward to 1989, the end of the Cold War, at least the hot Cold War. And then fast forward to 2008, the turbulence in the global markets. And then an attitude of, did we get it right? People began to ask questions. A lot of doubts began to be expressed, whether it is economic management, political management, or multilateralism. But 2015 created a hope for mankind. So we agree on sustainable development goals, the whole range of them. We agree on climate change, we talked about it in Paris. And then in Addis Ababa, we agreed on how to finance development, which I'm sure I've been discussing here. Now, there have been issues since then in the world, weakening multilateralism, elections in the UK, in the US, which generate different momentum. But it remains the hope of many that the light put up in 2015 will see the results. Now, why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because the one thing which can set us back politically, set us back economically, socially, set us back in protecting the planet is this problem: fragility. I know at the moment in America, you probably, if you are an important congressman or congresswoman, a leader, the first question will ask, what does it mean for me? There's no fragility in the US. Second, how much will it cost me? Why do I have to pay for it? And thirdly, what are others doing about it? I imagine if you're on the Hill, this is what you ask. And I'm here to tell you that, number one, what does it mean for you? A lot. More than you think. Remember when the first case of Ebola reached the US? Ebola had started in a very fragile part of West Africa, weakened by years of conflict. But Ebola reached the United States. Remember when the pirates on the coast of Somalia began to interfere with the global trade? The world had mobilized navies to ply in the waters of the Indian Ocean. Remember what is being said now about migration, or Europe is going to be swamped. All right? I liked very much what the president of Ghana said in Accra, reminding people, talk about migration, that the biggest migrants in the 19th century were not Africans or Middle Easterners. The biggest migrants were the Irish people getting to the US, Italians getting to the US, Irish getting to Scotland. Europeans were going in all directions. But now, of course, because of the lack of systems to try and pilot this in a much more understanding way, there is a mixture of panic. There's a mixture of not understanding what this means for our planet. So fragility matters for the United States. It does not only matter now, it will matter at all time until it has been resolved. How much will it cost? I think the best way to answer this is to ask the counterfactual. Suppose I do nothing about it. How much will it cost me? And if you seriously go through the counterfactuals, it could cost the United States quite a lot. And finally, what are others doing about it? You have got bits of attempts over the last, I would say 25 years, to deal with the fragility. And we're here to say that those approaches have not worked. Those approaches have not delivered enduring results. And we're trying to say why, based on the research which was done by colleagues in Oxford and London School of Economics, who are part of this commission, which listened to many people, civilians, military, from the third world, from the East, from the West, diplomats, business people, and so on. So these are not ideas made in the ivory towers of Oxford and the LSE. These were a result of hearings of what we had. So this afternoon, I'm still a bit thinking I'm somewhere else on the planet. I want to tell you what we think has gone wrong and what we can do about it. The first thing which we think has gone wrong is that we concluded too quickly that it was all about money. You have got a fragile situation, mobilize money, and throw money at the problem. And you have observed that in trying to rebuild the country like Libya, which at full capacity is able to export 1.5 million barrels per day, maybe even more, rebuilding Libya, getting Libya out of fragility will not be about money. It will be about something else. I'm even tempted to think with some tampered with a bit of unlimited comparison, that even South Sudan, probably at the beginning, money was not the limiting factor. They needed lots of money, but money alone could probably not be defined as a limiting factor. So the first thing we have made as international community, World Bank, IMF, UN, bilaterals, is throw money at the problem. It has not always worked. As Paul Colley was saying this morning, we have got a few cases of countries which actually have been able to move from fragility to steady state, my own country included. But many more countries have failed to escape fragility and have been falling back into fragility in spite of the billions of money which have been spent. That's the first point we make. And we have enough evidence for this. The second point we make is that we have assumed somehow there is a whole set of solutions, political, social, economic, which can be crafted nicely in DC, in London, in Frankfurt. And then you ship them to a fragile situation, a company with lots of money, and then you have a solution. We have compelling proof here that that has not only worked, it has actually done a lot of harm. And we're marshalling evidence to show what kind of harm has been done. I put an article today in a French publication called Le Monde. You can look at it. We have used two keywords. We have to get this problem back into the hands of the people of the country themselves, and the rest of us should try and do no harm. Because shipping money, ideas, supposedly superior ideas, is what has caused damage. The third thing, which is extremely controversial, David Cameron, I wish he was here to explain, is the following. An election is a process by which the people of the country elect people to govern them. But that's not the end in itself. The end, you're looking at the people who will deliver services, who will govern fairly for all, who will not steal your money. That is the aim. The aim is not to get a group of people into office replacing another group of people into office. No. That is the form of democracy. But the content is, you want them to deliver the services you want. You want highest fiduciary standards. And you want them to govern fairly for everyone. Far too often in fragile states, what have we done? So after the dollars and the money, okay guys, let's now have a multi-party election. We send in observers, an election is held, immediately contested by a losing party, which threatens to pick up arms, or often does pick up arms, and you're back to square one, waiting for the next election. And an argument is made here, which is compelling, which says, let us aim to have an electoral competition. But that should be the destination, not the beginning. At the beginning, let us build fundamentals for that kind of election. Now, it can be done in many different ways, such that you avoid to come to an electoral outcome which creates what I called this morning a set of people who are losers, but they're more than losers. They consider themselves permanent losers in this and the next election. And those permanent losers most likely form a coalition of permanent losers. So you wait for the next election, and you get the same outcome. And David Cameron, who has led the UK, he said, look, I'm a Democrat. I cannot be the one being told I don't like elections. But we're saying, as you move to an election, there's a way to get there. So in many fragile states, okay, so guns have gone silent, and the next thing, let us have an election. And there's an argument here, wait a minute, let us build some arrangements together, build a consensus, build trust, figure out how to deal with potential losers, such that there's this big tent where everybody feels they are not permanent losers. They may lose the next election, but they have a chance of winning the following one. And once they've won the following one, they don't exclude those who have lost out. So election is a destination, not the beginning. Along the way, you build some consensus and trust. The next mistake, which has been made, and I have only one more left, is that security is so fundamental. Will my children come back home from school? If I'm a business person, will I be attacked? Will I be robbed? It is a very basic thing which we assumed that it can be outsourced by bringing peacekeepers. Now, peacekeeping, I'm sure there's some diplomats here. The doctrine of peacekeeping was built on some fundamentals, if I recall them, here there. Number one, there has to be peace to keep. So those people who have been fighting or contesting each other, they invite you to help them maintain the peace, because there is peace to keep. So you are invited by those who have been contesting each other because there is peace to keep. Principle number two, there have to be minimal use of force. Only in self-defense can peacekeepers use force. Now, suggest that you put the peacekeepers in central Mogadishu and tell them to use minimal force. Or in the middle of Yemen, and say to them, use the minimal force. The third principle of peacekeeping was that the peacekeepers have to be completely neutral between the contestants. So you have to be neutral between Al-Shabaab and the Somalis. You don't take sides. And finally, another principle which is not important, which I think since 1992 there has been some evolution. There was an understanding that the 5 biggest countries, members of the Security Council, don't participate in peacekeeping operations. The reason was the Cold War. So peacekeepers come from Nepal, Bangladesh, small countries who have no stake at the time. It has since been modified somewhat. But in the kind of fragility we're talking about now, where the contest is not between a state and another, India and Pakistan, Cypriot Cyprus, Greek Cyprus, country A and country B, it is between non-state actors, terrorist groups, with a command structure armed, financed from somewhere. So those 4 conditions of peacekeeping cannot apply. And so there have been some kind of ad hoc arrangements to try to support peaceful situations, but it has not been ideal. In some countries, peacekeepers have been there for over 10 years. It is extremely expensive, and it is not working. And so the argument being made here, that let us figure out a different ways of establishing security by building local forces, whether police, judicial system, the army, and so on. Because that may be messy, but it may actually be the most endurable way of keeping the peace. And finally, we make a case for business. This morning I was saying that in Somalia, for the last 40 years, if you look at the flow of funds in Somalia, which I did in 2015, this is how it is. You have about maybe $1 billion from different local sources, the ports, airports, maybe about $1 billion from donors, some outside parties. But the biggest source of funds for Somalia, which kept the country together, was money by Somalis themselves living abroad. Last time I counted, we came close, just under $2 billion. The next was the ingenuity, innovation, entrepreneurship of the Somalis inside Somalia, under those conditions, where they be able to build basic businesses, including Coca-Cola plant, telecom companies, and so on. And what is being said here is, business people of that country have to be major stakeholders in building the peace. It can't be that, one, you want to build the peace. In the room, there'll be diplomats, United Nations, the government, and the business people are out of the room. We're saying they are stakeholders in building the peace from the beginning, not once the guns have gone silent. And we develop a case of how this can be done. Now, I've been told to be quite brief. I'm saying all this to interest you in reading this document. and saying to you that it matters for the US, it matters for the US of this generation and future generations. Because this planet we have, and technology available, and the means of transport available, the idea of saying that my country first, others next, if every country says that, we're all first and we're not. Good. Now, so this morning I gave an example, citing a former Italian prime minister. I think it was Enrico Letta. I need to check. I'm not sure. He used the phrase which I want you to reflect upon. So here we are rich countries, powerful countries. You have small countries down there. And he said, if you're on the Titanic, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in first class or in the coach class. We're going the same destination. So we have an interest in working together to go to another destination. So I'm saying to you, people in rich countries, you are sitting in first class. It's very good. It's very comfortable. Fine. The rest of us are sitting in the coach class. It's not very comfortable, but it's okay. But where is the Titanic heading to? And unless we can deal with fragility, whether it is fragility from conflict, fragility from dysfunctional states like Haiti, fragility from inadequate attention to primary health systems, as in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, or fragility soon from climate change, the Titanic is heading under, whether you're in first class or you are in coach class. So I'm here to say that it's very nice being in first class, but let us work together to make sure the Titanic goes in the right direction. And I hope you can read this report to see some of the modest recommendations we're making. So thank you for listening to me. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Dr. Kaberuka. My name is Inyang Abong-Hastrup, former Deputy Director, UN Office for South-South Cooperation, UNDP. You referred to Rwanda, your own country, and I think it would be interesting, because in the previous session, Rwanda was also quoted. What would you say were the critical factors in causing the cessation of conflict, moving from conflict through to peace? Leadership is one factor, we know. But what other... Oh. What is the factor? What would he say are the key factors that allowed Rwanda to make that transition from... And leadership is one dimension.
And leadership was one, but what are the other factors for Rwanda to come out of Fragility?
Yeah.
Okay, and then this, you, sir. Okay.
Yeah, Melvin Foote, Constituency for Africa. Good afternoon, sir. Good to see you again. I was in Rwanda in November for the Aortic Summit, and that was my first time there since 1994 and the genocide. What does Rwanda say to the rest of Africa? I mean, it was amazing what I saw. I was very impressed with the developments in the country. What does it speak to the rest of Africa?
Great. Okay, so two questions about what can Rwanda tell us based.
I think the Rwanda tells you that it does not matter however bad the initial conditions are. Look at Yemen today. It does not matter how bad it is. Provided a number of conditions are in place, you can actually get there. You have mentioned leadership. It's important. There have to be leadership and a vision. Yeah. That's fundamental. Without it, you go nowhere. But do you know, some of you know what happened in 1994? So when the genocide was happening, international community did the thing they do best: evacuate your nationals. Fly in airplanes, evacuate your nationals, leave the Rwandans to hold the baby. Good luck. And so you'll understand that when the process of rebuilding a country begins, there will be a strong sense of we are on our own, this is our problem, this is our country, and we'll fix it our way. You want to help us? This is what we want to do. This is why we want to go. Now, in many other countries, they begin from the opposite. We need money. So you organize a big donor conference. So as David Cameron was saying this morning, then you have got tons of donors flying in, each of them with their own conditionalities, all right, imported from outside, and the ownership of the country is completely undermined. They agree to do things they have no willingness or capacity to do because you're offering money and capacity and all this. In the case of Rwanda, the Rwanda leadership said no, that will not do. Here is our template from our history, from our culture. This is where we want to go. If you want to help us, we shall work together. And one of the key recommendations made in this report is that let us rally behind the ownership of the people of the country themselves. It might be messy, it might be slow, it might be imperfect, but it will be more enduring than what you import in from Washington. What you import in give you a semblance of working, but actually it can only work for a short period of time. There is a key recommendation here being made. So I would like to emphasize this because I think in many other areas we have made mistakes. I just mentioned South Sudan. I think the international community, I was leading Africa's Bank. I think we made mistakes. All of us came in with our own solutions, money, and it has not worked. Now the people of South Sudan will have to come together themselves, helped by the international community, but they'll have to lead the process themselves. Now, there are a few other countries who have got right. Colombia, the peace deal they signed in Colombia was their own. In Timor-Leste. And this morning, David also gave an example of Lebanon. Lebanon, in spite of all the crisis in the Middle East, still had the semblance of a functioning state because they have found a way to live together. Shiite Muslims, Sunni Muslims, Christians, how they share power in this dangerous neighborhood. So it's all about the country is in charge. It may not be the kind of formula you want, but it's a formula which they've agreed upon together in a consensual way. And that's what this report says.